Imagine it is Tuesday morning and you are holding a cup of hot coffee, habitually swiping open your phone screen or turning on the television to watch morning news. Suddenly, all channels and social media platforms were dominated by a glaring red burst of news. The news anchor's face was solemn, and the headline reads, "Suddenly, a respected elderly philanthropist with a net worth of billions and recognized as a moral model in the community drove into a remote mountainous area early this morning with his elderly son, who is also his only legal heir." What is even more chilling is that the old man sent a voice message to his friend before departure, calmly declaring that he had heard the call of the supreme God of the universe, asking him to personally cut open his son's throat with a knife and burn the body as the ultimate sacrifice to the god. Friends, if you saw this news in real life, how would your brain react in the first second? Without a doubt, your stomach will spasm and you will feel like the world is going crazy. Commentators from major news websites will immediately classify him as a lunatic suffering from severe paranoid schizophrenia. Child protection organizations' phone numbers will be hacked. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Division will intervene immediately, and fully armed special police riot control teams, snipers, and negotiation experts will rush to the deep mountains on Black Hawk helicopters, attempting to kill the old lunatic before he raises his butcher's knife to save the poor child, under the spotlight of modern society. This is undoubtedly a heinous However, if I tell you this plot that sounds more exaggerated and spine-chilling than any Netflix crime thriller documentary, not only has it not been nailed to the pillar of shame in the long river of human history, but also the father who almost became a murderer is revered by more than half of the world, Christians and Muslims, as the father of faith that cannot be profaned. Yes, you absolutely guessed right. This is the most destructive, controversial, and terrifying. Listen, everyone in front of the screen, whether you are a devout Christian who goes to church every weekend or a staunch atheist who only believes in scientific data, today I ask you to do one thing: temporarily and completely remove all your theological defense mechanisms and religious-colored glasses. At the beginning of the video, I solemnly promise you that we are not sitting here today to retell an ancient myth that requires humans to blindly obey or even abandon the bottom line of human ethics. On the contrary, we need to conduct a deep dissection. In today's sharing, I have planted a crucial hook to reveal to you the hidden brain survival code behind this 4,000-year-long story, which has been confirmed by modern top neuroscience laboratories and clinical psychology. This password I call the neurocognitive restart mechanism. Once you truly understand and master the scientific truth about absolute submission and letting go, it will become the most powerful psychological weapon of your life. When you face the abyss of company bankruptcy, the excruciating pain of marital betrayal, or even unbearable separation and death in your life, this code will determine whether you will completely collapse or be reborn from the ruins. Are you ready with your mind? We need to travel through the dust of time and space and return to the land of Canaan, where the human soul is forced to an absolute dead end. In order for this story to truly prick your nerves, we must establish an extremely cruel contrast. This is definitely not an ordinary middle-class American father who took his son camping and baking marshmallows in a national park on a sunny weekend. You need to imagine this fact in your mind. Abraham waited for this child for a whole 100 years. 100 years. What is that concept? Please empathize with your Perhaps you are now in your 30s, in the climbing stage of your career, worrying about your mortgage and promotion every day, and losing a lot of hair. Perhaps you are in your 50s, experiencing a midlife crisis, watching your past dreams gradually fade away, leaving only faint. Perhaps you are 70 years old, packing your life's luggage, facing the aging of your body and the departure of friends. For Abraham, Isaac was not just a biological descendant who transmitted DNA. Isaac was the only promise fulfilled by the unseen highest being after his wandering life, leaving his hometown, experiencing countless ridicule and despair. Isaac is the absolute pillar of his spiritual world, his past, present, and future, his reputation, his pension, and his only solace against the fear of death. Isaac is his. Then, without warning, the voice that had generously bestowed upon him all of this and promised his descendants that there would be as many stars in the sky and as much sand by the seaside, suddenly descended on a quiet night, and said to him in an unquestionable tone, "To Mount Moriah, where I have instructed you, and offer him as a burnt offering to me." A burnt offering, this means not simply killing, but cutting open the beloved's throat with your own hands, draining their blood, cutting them into pieces. Ladies and gentlemen, what level of cosmic level mental abuse is this? This is not just killing, it is killing the heart. I gave you what you crave the most, and then demanded that you destroy it with your own hands and extreme cruelty. Don't we feel familiar with these pain points in real life? Close your eyes and think for a moment. You devoted 10 years of effort to that startup, mortgaged your house, missed out on your child's growth, and were ultimately kicked out in an unprepared capital operation. Think about how you went to a Ivy League school to support your child, scrimped and saved, only to end up with him cutting off ties with you due to psychological issues. In the depths of each of our lives, there is an Isaac that we absolutely cannot touch. That thing could be your career, your social status, someone, or your pathological pursuit of perfection. We hold it tightly in our hands. However, the most suffocating and testing part of this story is not the few seconds when Abraham raised his butcher's knife on the mountaintop. The real hell is that 3-day and 3-night journey. The text of the Bible records here in an extremely cold and understated manner. Abraham got up early in the morning, prepared his donkey, chopped the wood for the burnt offering, and walked with his 2 servants and Isaac towards the place God had shown him for 3 days. Friends, from the perspective of modern psychology and neuroscience, these 72 hours are the ultimate test of the pain that the human brain can endure. This is not a murder driven by passion, nor is it a sudden impulse in the brain. It is a premeditated step-by-step. What intense chemical reactions were happening in Abraham's brain during these long, silent days? Here, we must introduce a core concept frequently discussed in neurobiology at Harvard University and Stanford University, the life or death game between amygdala hijacking and the prefrontal cortex. When humans realize that they are about to lose the most important and dependent thing in their lives, the amygdala deep in our brain's limbic system is like an extremely sensitive fire alarm, instantly sounding the highest level alarm. It will command the adrenal glands to secrete massive amounts of cortisol and adrenaline. Under such extreme high pressure, ordinary people's higher cognitive center, namely the prefrontal cortex, will completely shut down and fall into the animal instincts of fighting, escaping, or freezing. You will panic. You will frantically deny reality. However, Abraham did not flee or go insane. He simply walked forward step by step. During these 3 days, he applied an advanced mental technique that has just been summarized by modern top psychology. Dr. Marsha Linehan, a renowned American psychologist and founder of dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, proposed a concept called radical acceptance that has saved countless patients with severe depression and borderline personality. Please note that accepting completely does not mean that you agree, like, or succumb to the tragedy that is happening. It means that you stop using your limited energy to fight against the cruel reality that cannot be changed anymore. You no longer deceive yourself by saying that this is just a dream or that God must be joking. During these 3 days, with each step taken, Abraham killed Isaac once in his heart. He repeatedly simulated the most painful outcome in his brain until he completely accepted the fact of losing Isaac. These 3 days were 72 hours of completely stripping away. Let's shift our focus back to modernity and see an absolutely real and powerful case. To see how this mechanism operates in today's world, let's first look at a case suitable for people in their 30s and 40s. I have a client, let's call him David for now. David is 38 years old and the founder of a highly anticipated AI startup in Silicon Valley. That company, without a doubt, belongs to David. He worked day and night for 6 years, and for the sake of the company, his marriage ran a red light. His neck and stomach were all affected. Just before the company was preparing for a massive Series C financing, his co-founder and best college friend, along with external capital, launched an extremely covert malicious pressure on him. David faces a dead end. Either he uses various gray and even potentially illegal means to win over other shareholders in a bloody battle for control. But this is highly likely to completely destroy the company's reputation and even put himself in jail. Either he can only watch helplessly. David fell into extreme panic and could only sleep for 2 hours every night for a month. His brain was completely hijacked by the amygdala, filled with anger and a desire for revenge. The night before he was ready to sign a legal document that could completely destroy him, he went to see his. After listening to his roar, the consultant calmly said to him, "David, suppose this company is dead tonight. It no longer exists. What value do you, David, have when you offer flowers at its tombstone, and the sun rises tomorrow morning?" This sentence is like a lightning bolt striking the frontal lobe of the brain. David began his 3-day journey. He sat in an empty office and experienced extreme pain. He no longer thought about how to counterattack, but forced himself to accept the fact that I had been kicked. A miracle happened. The moment he truly let go in his heart, his sense of panic disappeared. The next day, he walked into the conference room without hysterical arguments or threats of destruction. He signed the withdrawal agreement with great calmness and dignity, and left with a small but dignified severance payment. What was the result? After leaving the high-pressure meat grinder, his vision was completely opened up. Half a year later, relying on his keen intuition in the field of AI, he invested in and participated in another, highly promising non-profit medical project. More importantly, he saved his almost broken marriage and reunited with his 3. David later told me that it wasn't until the moment I voluntarily placed the company on the altar that I truly became the master of my own life. Before, I was a slave of the company. David's story perfectly replicates Abraham's psychological trajectory. When you hold on to you tightly, it becomes the rope that strangles you. When you dare to hand it over, you gain true redemption. Now, as the story continues to unfold, we have reached the suffocating climax. Abraham and Isaac finally climbed to the top of Mount Moriah. He built an altar and arranged the firewood. Then he tied Isaac up and placed him on the firewood. Here, we must use the most basic logic and historical knowledge to puncture a long-standing stereotype. Isaac was definitely not a 3-year-old baby who could only cry and scream at that time. According to the cross-comparison and calculation of ancient Hebrew historians, Isaac was already a fully developed and strong young man between the ages of 25 and 30 at that time. And what about Abraham? He is already an elderly man over 100 years old, walking unsteadily. Imagine that scene. A centenarian holding a rope, trying to tie a strong man in his 20s to the altar. If this young man wants to run, or just resists a little and pushes the old man, Abraham will definitely shatter. This is a one-sided murder. What does this mean by an extremely shocking fact? This means that this is not a massacre of an innocent son by a tyrannical father, but a voluntary sacrifice reached by the father and son on the mountaintop. Surpassing the limits of human reason, Isaac, this young life, chose absolute obedience after learning that he trusts his father, just as his father trusts that lofty voice. This incredible collaboration and obedience demonstrated in the face of extreme fear is the key to unlocking post-traumatic growth, PTG, in modern psychology. Dr. Richard Tedeschi, a pioneer in clinical psychology, has conducted in-depth research on thousands of survivors who have suffered devastating traumas such as war, terminal illness, and loss of loved ones. He found that a small group of people not only did not succumb to trauma, but also burst out with astonishing vitality and profound wisdom afterwards. What are their common characteristics? They are able to imbue incomprehensible suffering with a transcendent meaning. At the moment when Abraham and Isaac were on the altar as the old father's trembling hands bound his son's young body, they together elevated this seemingly cruel and inhumane act into the ultimate trust in the highest order of the universe. They gave up the judgment from a human perspective and chose to submit. Immediately after, the most exciting moment arrived. Listen carefully. I want to completely unravel the hook buried at the beginning of the article and show you the ultimate secret of neuroscience, hidden under the cloak of mythology. Abraham reached out his hand, tightly grasped the sharp knife, lifted it high, and prepared to stab his son's chest. At this critical moment, when his heart was about to stop beating, the sky split open, and the angel's voice stopped him like thunder. Stop! Don't let... The Bible says, Abraham looked up and saw a ram with its horns caught in a dense grove of trees. Abraham took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in place of his son. Friends, it sounds like this is just a lucky coincidence that left someone behind, right? Absolutely not. Here lies the most intricate linkage mechanism between the human visual nervous system and psychological stress. Let's invite Professor Andrew Huberman, the most renowned neurobiologist of our time and from Stanford University School of Medicine. Professor Huberman has demonstrated in detail in his laboratory the direct correspondence between human visual focus and the state of the autonomous nervous system. When a person is under extreme stress, fear, or focused on a threat, such as Abraham preparing to kill, their sympathetic nervous system will go crazy, and their heart rate will accelerate. Along with it, his pupils will instantly contract, and this is scientifically known as tunnel vision. At the moment Abraham raised the knife, his world was extremely cramped, with no other images in his retina, only the knife shining with a cold light and Isaac's throbbing chest. His brain blocks all irrelevant information, but when the angel's voice interrupted him, and when the highest authority announced the end of the test and that you had passed, Abraham's psychological defenses instantly relaxed. He realized that he had completely sacrificed his son in his heart. And now, his son. Between these electric sparks, he let go of his obsession. His stress hormones plummeted, and the parasympathetic nervous system responsible for relaxation began to take over the body again. What are the physiological reactions that come with it? His pupils dilated, his optic nerve relaxed, and his vision instantly expanded from that narrow spot. This is called panoramic vision, only when Abraham's gaze was no longer fixed and paranoid on his son who had to sacrifice. The ram with its two horns stuck in the bushes has been there all along. It didn't suddenly fall from the sky, it was already struggling in the woods. But under the extreme pressure Abraham was under, he couldn't even see it. Only when he truly achieves complete letting go, his cognitive bandwidth is released, and he sees the path that has long been prepared for him. This is the scientific explanation for miracles. Miracles often exist around you for a long time, but you suffer from psychological problems due to excessive attachment to a specific goal or pain, leading you to turn a blind eye to the way out. This did not only happen on mountaintops 4,000 years ago. Let's take another look at a heavy case targeting people aged. I know a desperate mother named Susan. Susan is a very outstanding retired teacher with a pure and respected life. But she has a 30-year-old son who is addicted to prescription drugs. For 5 whole years, Susan's life turned into a living hell. What is she? It is her absolute control over her son's life and the mother's obsession with saving the child. In order to save her son, she spent all her pension to hire the best lawyer for him, sought medical treatment everywhere, and searched his room, like a paranoid detective every day, monitoring his phone, and smelling the smell on his clothes. She stared fixedly at her son, their relationship filled with lies, arguments, and mutual torment. The son not only did not improve, but also intensified due to a huge suffocating feeling, and even started stealing things from home. Susan suffers from severe depression and somatization disorder where she can see nothing except for her son's addiction. Her world became narrower and narrower until one day, she had a serious car accident on the highway due to extreme fatigue and almost died. On the hospital bed, a psychological counselor specializing in counseling, the Al-Anon Family Counseling Association, said a cruel but extremely true sentence to her. Susan, you are not God. You cannot replace him in drug rehabilitation. You are holding onto him tightly and depriving him of the right to bear the consequences of his own life. You must place him on the altar, return him to himself, or return him to fate, even if it means he may die from this illness. But after a long struggle, Susan, who was discharged from the hospital, made the greatest sacrifice of her life. She stopped providing financial aid and tracking, and said to her son, I love you, I will always love you, but I will no longer intervene in your destruction. You can't live in this room anymore. You have to take responsibility for your life. She locked the child outside the door and went back to the empty house, crying loudly. At that moment she was Abraham holding up the knife. However, the miracle once again manifested itself through science. When Susan completely let go of her desire for control and accepted the worst-case scenario, her parasympathetic nervous system began to operate, and she finally freed herself from it, because she no longer focused all her energy on keeping an eye on her son. Her vision widened. She saw the rams that had always existed around her, and discovered that there were many impoverished children in need of tutoring in the community. She reconnected with her old friend, whom she had lost contact with for many years, and began to participate in gardening clubs. What was even more shocking was that a few months later, the son, who was forced to have no way out, and could no longer rely on his mother, after truly experiencing the despair of living on the streets, took the initiative to call the government's free drug rehabilitation center. When Susan let go, not only did she save herself, but she also gave her son a way out. This is what happens in this real world. The salvation brought by letting go of control. Seeing this, friends, let's dig another kilometer deeper. Why does this ancient story have such a profound impact on us, who are between the age? Because we are currently in the golden and silver age, where we have the most and fear losing the most in our lives. At the age of 30, you are afraid of missing out on the trend of the times and being left behind by peers. At the age of 40, you are afraid of defaulting on your mortgage and the decline of your social status. At the age of 50, you are afraid that a certain organ in your body, and you are afraid that your child may not be as successful as you expected. At the age of 60 or 70, you begin to face the countdown to life, afraid of being forgotten by this rapidly moving world. In each of our arms, we tightly hold a pile of our own. We use singer, a renowned American meditation master, psychology PhD, and former CEO of a billion-dollar company, proposed a highly disruptive underlying logic in his phenomenal best-selling book, The Surrender. The ultimate root of human suffering does not lie in the deterioration of the external environment or the loss of things, but in the deeply rooted pathological obsession in our brains that things must and can only develop according to my expected script. We bind our sense of security to some extent. The great core of the story of Abraham sacrificing Isaac is not at all about praising a bloody, cold-blooded obedience. It is demonstrating to all humanity the highest dimensional psychological state, ultimate submission. The Creator never wanted the life of that. What God wants, or what the ultimate law of life requires, is Abraham's obsession. The Supreme Being was actually asking Abraham, do you feel safe because of the gift I gave you, Isaac, or do you feel safe because you trust the source me, who can give you gifts? When Abraham proved on the mountaintop that he was no longer bound by his pathological attachment to his son, and that he could maintain the integrity of his faith, even if he lost everything, the laws of the universe immediately returned Isaac to him intact. Abraham, who came down from Mount Moriah, is no longer the fragile old man who worries about his son's safety every day. He has become an invincible monument to his soul, because he has overcome the greatest fear and pain of human loss. And Isaac, who came down from that mountain, was no longer the boy who was overprotected under his father's huge wings. He witnessed his father's reverence for ultimate faith on the altar, and he also fulfilled his submission to fate. After walking on the brink of death, this father and son established a new, absolutely free and sacred relationship that was not based on possessiveness. Now, we need to thoroughly downgrade and strike this grand narrative into your secular life today. We need to conduct a deep and elevated summary and review, and see how to transform this wisdom into an extremely powerful altruistic thinking. Today, starting from a seemingly counterintuitive and suspenseful twist, we take you into Abraham's heart-wrenching 3-day journey. We used modern neuroscience to analyze that these 3 days were not a blind rush, but a difficult reshaping of the prefrontal cortex of the brain. We have verified the destructive power of modern people and the tremendous vitality brought by giving up control through real cases of Silicon Valley executives going bankrupt and older mothers letting go to save their children. We have uncovered the neurobiological code hidden within this millennium-long story. Only when you actively let go of the right paranoia and break the pressure can your panoramic view be open, and you can see the ram that has been stuck in the forest and can save the whole world. So with this cognition, how should we face today? This leads to our final and most important concept today. The highest level of altruism is the appropriate withdrawal and letting go. We often have an extremely arrogant and misplaced love. We think that giving the best to children, partners, and employees, tightly protecting them and not letting them when you treat the people or things you love as your private property and the only source of your own security and value, you are not actually loving them. You are suffocating them with extreme psychological pressure and slowly destroying yourself. You have turned them into yours and placed them on an altar that they cannot. True altruistic thinking is a letting go accompanied by extreme courage. In order for the person you deeply love to grow their own bones and wings, you must learn to let go of your hands that try to control everything. In order for your team to truly stand on their own, you must tolerate their mistakes, and in order for your partner to breathe freely, you must stop using your anxiety to hijack their lives. When you dare to give your most cherished things to the unknown future, you are actually returning true freedom to them, and at the same time, you are freeing yourself. Tonight, or one day in the future, when you feel extreme anxiety, anger, and fear, when you feel that something crucial to you is slipping through your fingers, and you are ready to do whatever it takes to catch it, I implore you to take a deep breath. What is my one that deprives me of sleep and drives me crazy? Is it my face, my savings? Is it obsession with a certain relationship? Or is it my pathological obsessive compulsive disorder towards a perfect life? Secondly, if I were to build an altar in my heart today, in this room, and put the thing I hold tightly onto it, fully accepting the fact that it may leave me forever, will I die immediately, stripping away these external labels and obsessions? Can the pure me still find a trace of meaning in this world? Thirdly, when I stop fearing and staring at the impending loss with extreme intensity, I try to relax my breathing and broaden my horizons. In this vast world that I had previously overlooked, where is the backup plan that I have always despised? The alternative way of life that has helped me regain peace, and the broader self-worth that has always existed in the woods. Friends, this world is full of uncertainty, and this is the only thing. Don't be afraid to walk up that Mount Moriah. Go face your inner fears and examine your persistent obsession. At the peak of that mountain, in front of the altar that seems like you are about to lose everything, what awaits you is definitely not destruction and nothingness. When you learn to truly let go and submit, when you experience the sacrifice deep in your soul, you will gain unprecedented breadth of vision and indestructible freedom. Because when you are no longer afraid of losing, there is no force in this world that can defeat you. This is the greatest spiritual legacy left by the stumbling centenarian on a desolate mountaintop 4,000 years ago, through his obedience and letting go, to all of humanity today. May every one of us in front of the screen find their own ram in the desperate and seemingly unsolvable moments of life and attain ultimate peace and redemption. Thank you for listening.